Hello mate, so huge news off of the back of the interview with DM, Ghazi and Jonathan, so I'm going to waste no time, let's get straight into the highlights for you. Alright, so first up here is everything they discussed with the impressive Witch and Minion reveal. Jonathan had this to say about the relationship between permanent and temporary minions.
Another really challenging thing about minion balance, and effectively minions are like amazing single target damage. So it's very hard to get the balance correct as far as like making it so that clearing can happen, but also that bossing can happen. And effectively the temporary minions are a kind of way to achieve that, because when clearing you have more temporary minions, your amount of AoE damage effectively goes up due to number of minions. But when you get into boss fights, the amount of single target damage effectively goes down a little bit compared to what it would be if you had all those same minions in a boss fight.
Spirit will be getting its own user interface panel redesign where you can manage your minions, find out more info, yet another UX win for PoE 2. There's now a command button for minions, and in case you missed it, that command button can also open chests and send them to open doors for you. Scepters will have minion skills inherent in the implicits on them, and they will give you a chance to have more minions than you could otherwise. Different types of minions now have their own command skills, and we saw this with the example with the skeletal arsonist being able to explode low health enemies, as well as the skeletal sniper who had a poison arrow that created a sort of caustic cloud. We learned that the witch is mainly designed around filling that class fantasy of the horde, the army of the dead minions, and that there will be other options available for that more single or low number of very powerful minions like a Reaper build or a Golem build. There is no minion cap, there's no +1 to skeletons or anything like that. It is simply managed around how much spirit you can get. The more spirit, the more minions. Simple, effective, flexible system.
20 permanent is kind of about what I expect in an endgame.
Any non-unique enemy can be spectred. This means that there are roughly 600 plus enemies that can be spectred that you can fold into your army at any point using the Bind Spectre gem. There's some very powerful mobs available with unique abilities, as we saw with the Faradun Impaler, though the stronger the mob, the more expensive they are in spirit cost. Alright, Jonathan revealed a lot about the development of minions and what they wanted them to be in PoE 2. Definitely go watch the full video over on Ghazi or DM's channel if you want to see that. However, in summary, what he said was that they originally wanted to have formations, and they were going to have the ability for you to sort of organize your minions and command them into formations. Though what they found in practice was that it ended up more clunky than if you just let the minions do their own thing. So they let go of that and went back to a very simple command key like we've seen in Last Epoch. Alright, talking about corpses, Jonathan was very clear that he does not want corpses to be this infinite resource that you can just cast Desecrate or Unearth and basically summon tons and tons of corpses. So what they've done instead is got rid of Desecrate and got rid of any corpse generating skills. So now corpses have a value to them again. How you use them matters, and there are ways using power charges to summon temporary minions without corpses. The guys asked if there would be minion AI altering support gems like Feeding Frenzy, for example, and Jonathan said that he's hoping that they won't need them, that they should just be smart enough to do what they want them to do. Alright, on to content. First thing to note is that it looks like not all of the classes are going to be available at the start of early access. They will join fairly soon into development, but they're not all going to be ready, so we're looking at probably 8 classes, maybe a couple more. Some exciting bonus content news here. Jonathan shared in the interview that there will be random encounters that can spawn in areas, though they won't always spawn, and they might spawn in different areas for different people. The examples with this were coming across a bunch of saplings, summoning a treant, and the other example was a witch's hut. He said there's many, many more of these, and it should help us with our playthroughs, our repetitive playthroughs, leveling alt characters through the campaign.
So effectively like a little mini boss encounter, but it's technically not a unique, it's just a rare. And the funny thing about this, in my opinion, is that a lot of games bosses are kind of this, like the actual bosses of this. But in our game, it's like this is just like an extra boss we're throwing. So every area kind of has this another boss, you know what I mean? That's just like this afterthought that like is still fun because it's just like a monster from later on in the game. But when you get one of these later game monsters in an early area, it does feel boss enough to you.
Spicy takes here from Jonathan, very spicy. Talking about replayability and campaigns, Jonathan did reiterate that the random league seed, where every league, the map and the layout of each act will change quite dramatically, is still confirmed. Another very good sign, they are still adding more and more bosses into these side areas and areas that don't have their own unique boss yet, which is a very good sign in my eyes, just as a side note, that clearly the boss team are, if not ahead of schedule, are very much on schedule. Otherwise, why would they be coming back and adding extra bosses into the earlier areas of the game? So that's very good news, very reassuring when we think about hitting that release date at the end of the year. So an interesting one here, there are going to be hard-coded drops earlier on in the campaign, which mean that if you just have really bad RNG, you will get a certain number of alchemy orbs, chaos orbs, maybe a rare, or some uncut gems like support gems and skill gems. This means that the variance early on where it's critical and every item matters won't be as big. Another juicy one for us and fans of this channel, we got a little tidbit around the ascendancies, specifically the witch ascendancies.
The witch, for example, the three kind of major themes would be the kind of like the minion summoning theme, the chaos debuff type theme, and the bone skill theme.
We have already made a very chaos degen focused ascendancy class in the Defiler. Go check that out. So we might have to take a stab at the other two as well. Alright, onto skills and the passive tree. So this is a huge one. This is probably the biggest thing that was confirmed in the interview, and that is that you will only be able to use a single version of a support gem on each character. So for example, say added lightning damage, you will only be able to use that on one of your skills. You can't use multiple instances of the same support gem. So you've really got to decide which skills you want to enhance with which support gems. Jonathan went on to explain their thinking around this a little.
If you just had a support, for example, like melee physical damage that just increases your, physical damage of a melee skill, then if you're playing a melee character, you're going to put that on every single skill, because why wouldn't you, if it's the most efficient damage boost that you could get? And we kind of thought that that would be really boring. So the initial solution that we had was, design the skills so that that's not going to happen. And what that kind of meant was we kind of had to think like, okay, we need to design this thing so that you kind of only really want it on one skill of your character. That made it really, really hard to design support gems. Like, we were really struggling with that. The support gems all felt kind of weird and not like, it's like not obvious how to use them, and like they didn't feel powerful. And like, I'm not sure who had this idea, but at some point we were just like, hang on, we could just literally limit you to one of each support gem per character. And as soon as we thought about that, we were like, okay, suddenly not only does like every support from PoE 1 immediately become like relevant and possible to do again in PoE 2, but also it just unlocks like a huge amount of other designs that we could immediately do. So that decision kind of like immediately made supports just back to a reasonably good place again.
They're keen to make sure that for every single skill gem, there's a minimum of at least say 9 supports that you could have available. So there's always going to be variations in the ways that you might want to use your supports on different skills. They actually likened it to a Magic the Gathering game design philosophy where you want to offer different options for different types of players. It shows how Magic the Gathering is still a very influential game within the GGG studio. Obviously, Chris is a huge fan of it, and Jonathan maybe as well. Once again, PoE trading card game, let's make it happen. I would love to collect me some PoE cards. Jonathan said the team are finding it incredibly difficult to design support gems for auras, so they might actually reduce the number of support sockets that are available on aura skills. I'm curious if you guys have any interesting ideas for support gems for aura skills. If you do, let me know in the comments below. Talking about the comments, this is the perfect time to say, please, if you're enjoying these videos, like and subscribe. We've got tons more PoE 2 content coming. Thank you very much. Let's carry on. The guys in the interview asked if it was going to cause a problem if all skills are weapon bound, and if that was going to create a kind of clunkiness. And Jonathan made the point that, well, actually they're not, and specifically everything that is classed as a spell is fundamentally weapon agnostic, so it doesn't matter what weapon you're holding, any spell can be cast by anyone. Right, it's another pretty big change. So they are changing the way that the uncut gem skill UI works. So currently all of the skills are organized by class, and this is helpful for marketing reasons. But what they want to change it to is that all skills are actually going to be organized by their weapon type. So anything that is weapon dependent will have its category, and you'll be able to filter through and select, okay, for this weapon I want to use, here's all the skills available to me. I really like this change, and it is a nice reminder that this game is actually not class based. In a way, there are classes for the ascendancies, but really you can build anything you want, and this is a nice reminder of that. Alright, finally on the skills and passive section, this one is pretty big. So we found out, and it's a huge surprise, that there is going to be multiple versions of the starting zones on the passive tree. So let's take the first 30 nodes around the different attribute starting points. You've got intelligence for witch and sorceress, for example, or the warrior and the marauder down on strength. It's a little crazy to get your head around, but dependent on which class you pick, so let's say you're a marauder, you would get a version that is catered to the marauder of that starting zone. All the passives would be different. If you switched over to a warrior, you would have different nodes there, and then any other class that doesn't start in that location also gets a different version. So say you're a sorceress or a ranger or a shadow, and you pathed all the way down to the starter location for the warrior and marauder, you would have another third different version of that starting zone. Very interesting, and it basically said that it allows them to create more extreme and interesting nodes and designs based on what class you pick. Okay, there's some juicy stuff left, but none of it had a category, so I'm just going to put this into sort of a miscellaneous section. Right, first off, huge relief for me, and I'm sure for many of you guys. Jonathan confirmed that there will be a weapon locking system. So for example, say you craft an incredible sword, a one-handed sword, but you want to use a shield as well as a scepter, let's say. You will be able to lock that first main hand weapon slot, and then when you're hot swapping between your skills, between your scepter and your shield, it will keep that weapon locked. Same for a shield. You can imagine that you're crafting an incredible shield, but you wanted to use two different main hand weapons for different skills. Well, it will be able to lock that shield. I know a lot of people were worried they were going to have to roll multiple shields, for example. Not the case. Bravo. Next up, this is one for all you money spenders out there. So early access supporter packs have been confirmed. There will likely be just an access one, maybe £10, £15, £20, something like that. And then there will likely be higher tier versions where you're getting some micros, some cosmetics, and maybe some special limited edition one-off. This is the launch of PoE 2 versions of things. So very exciting. I know myself, I really want to grab one of these, maybe one of the higher tier packs. I'm going to save up some money to do that because it's just a special moment being able to say you were there for the early access. And imagine you had the supporter pack, the first ever supporter pack for PoE 1, and what nostalgia that would bring. Alright, Jonathan once again confirmed and reiterated there will be no item quantity modifiers available to the player. So even on map mods, there's basically no item quantity modifiers in the game except for the rarity of a mob, that obviously affects it, as well as the party play system. Now, the way he described it, it's a very long sort of description of how it works, but basically you're going to end up with roughly the same amount of items in terms of quantity. It's just how they've balanced what type of items you get in a party have changed. So they've reduced the number of weapons you get, but increased the number of jewelry slightly, and that just helps players with not getting too much of a load of crap, basically. Jonathan also made a very important point, which is if you like PoE 2 content, then you should like and subscribe to this channel.
Me, naughty.
Right, another big one here from the recent event. Jonathan said that the main point of feedback was something that surprised him was that people want to be able to hot swap from the controller through to their keyboard and mouse. This makes sense if you can imagine you're sort of doing all your combat on controller, maybe it feels better there, but then you want to do your inventory management and all of your hideout admin stuff on a keyboard and mouse. Makes perfect sense, so glad to hear that's coming. Simply put, hardcore is going to be an entirely different ball game in PoE 2.
I wouldn't play hardcore the first time you're playing. Especially not in PoE 2.
And the last interesting tidbit that I found was that Jonathan started talking about rare monsters and basically saying that rares and the mods and the types of mobs and the mod combinations that we get are still very much up for debate, and there's still something that the team are working on. He thinks that it's in an okay place, but thinks there's a lot more that they could do there, and I agree with that. Whether that's something that evolves over the course of the game over the next few years, we don't know. We saw what they tried with the Arch Nemesis system, didn't work, but that does not mean that they should not try many more things to try and get it right. There's lots of interesting suggestions. Head over to the Reddit. Someone just put a post up about it there. It's quite interesting. But yeah, I'm keen to hear what your thoughts are on rare mobs and how they might be able to handle that. Alright, muckers, so that is what I have for this video. If you like this kind of content, you like the news, or maybe you're interested in the theory crafting stuff, I have just cooked up an entire Incursion 2.0 redesign of the Incursion League system and what it could look like in PoE 2. So if you're interested did go check that out. Like most of the things on this channel, it is basically me wishing that I'd made better life choices and somehow worked at GGG. Friends, exiles, thank you so much for watching. As always, ta-da.